Tonight, an exclusive interview with a man who in many ways has shaped the agenda surrounding the Synod on the Family. Walter Cardinal Kasper discusses his controversial proposal for divorced and remarried Catholics. And later, we'll get reaction from canon lawyer Father GERALD MURRAY and journalist Robert Arroyo. Finally, Gregorian Chant returns to the birthplace of St. Benedict. Father CASSIAN FOLSOM of the Monks of Norcia will explain the chart-topping success of their new CD, Benedicta. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. What a show we've got for you tonight. A must-see interview with Cardinal Walter Kasper, Robert Arroyo, Father GERALD MURRAY, and Father CASSIAN FOLSOM are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, or if you have a question for one of our guests, or if you'd like to react to my live tweeting throughout, I'm on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo. You can also email us at worldover@EWTN.com. Let's go to the brief news from the world over this week. The U.S. Congress has rolled back the National Security Agency's ability to collect and access the phone records of millions of Americans. Led by Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, the USA Freedom Act cleared the Senate 67-32 on Tuesday. It was signed into law by the president. It is the first piece of legislation to reform the post-9/11 surveillance and security measures. Gone is the bulk collection of phone data by the government. New protocols do allow intelligence agencies to access specific records from telephone companies, but only after requesting and receiving a court order. And be sure to join us next week for our exclusive sit-down with presidential candidate Senator Rand Paul. We'll talk about the Freedom Act, his run for the White House, and much more. And Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts is endorsing a ballot campaign to prevent the repeal of the state's death penalty. This past week, state lawmakers overrode Ricketts' veto and abolished capital punishment, making Nebraska the 19th state in the union to do so. The Catholic bishops hailed the new law, asserting the death penalty does not deter crime or promote the common good. Governor Ricketts said the ban means the loss of a critical tool to protect law enforcement and Nebraska families. The state will proceed with executions of 10 people already on death row. Death penalty supporters have until late August to submit enough signatures for the referendum, which would take place in November of 2016. And senior Vatican officials got a little testy this week with a pro-life activist who criticized those invited to the Holy See's recent climate change conference. Stefano Gennarini of the UN watchdog group Center for Family and Human Rights Institute took issue with the Vatican welcoming UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and UN advisor Jeffrey Sachs to their climate conference, given the men's advocacy for abortion rights and other population control measures. Gennarini published an interview with Bishop Marcello Sanchez Sorando, Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of the Social Sciences. In it, the bishop defended the UN's climate goals since they, quote, don't mention abortion or population control. They speak of access to family planning, sexual and reproductive health, and reproductive rights. The interpretation and application of those depends on governments, end quote. As for the criticism about collaborating with the United Nations, Ban and Sachs, Bishop Sorando said, those attacks are the doings of oil interests and the Tea Party. Then the president of the Pontifical Academy of the Social Sciences, Margaret Archer, got into the act on the Vatican website. In a statement, Archer questioned Gennarini's understanding of Catholic social doctrine, asking rhetorically, is your sole concern with human dignity confined to the period between conception and live birth? An appointee of Pope Francis last year, Archer then reminded Gennarini, quote, I am appointed by the Pope and responsible directly to him. I'm afraid that leaves you and your cohort out in the cold. Good thing there's climate change. On a related note, Pope Francis's encyclical on the environment will be released on Thursday, June 18th. The World Over Live will offer full analysis that day. And a new survey on the worldwide Catholic Church reveals some good news and some not so good. According to the Georgetown-based Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, the global Catholic Church has grown 57% since 1980. There are now more than 1.2 billion Catholics worldwide. The highest growth has been seen in the Church in Africa, up over 200% to 198 million faithful. The Americans are still home to the world's largest group of Catholics at nearly 600 million and up 56% since 1980. Less encouraging was the lack of growth in the Church of Europe, a scant 6%. Also in decline was the use of sacraments among Catholics across the spectrum. And Bruce Jenner wasn't the only one changing things up this week. Members of the Church of England are considering a gender change for God. On the heels of a successful campaign to consecrate its first female bishop, a woman's advocacy group is now pushing for God to also be referred to as she. Anglican Reverend Jody Stowell said the current understanding of God as an old white man in the sky is deficient. God, she said, is both male and female and beyond male and female. Former Member of Parliament Anne Widdecombe, who became a Catholic when the Church of England began ordaining women priests, told the Daily Mail that the movement is plain silly, unbiblical, and ridiculous. God clearly isn't a she. As a she can't be a father. When we return, my exclusive interview with the man who's been called the Pope's theologian, the cardinal responsible for so much debate at the Synod on the Family. Cardinal Walter Kasper discusses and defends his controversial proposal for divorced and remarried Catholics next when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. My next guest has dominated conversations inside the Catholic Church for more than 2 years. Since Pope Francis publicly praised his work, he's been called the Pope's theologian. A former German bishop, a research assistant to Hans Kung, and president of the Vatican's Pontifical Council for Christian Unity, Cardinal Walter Kasper has been advocating a controversial plan for 20 years. Last year, he renewed his proposal, which would allow divorced and remarried Catholics to return to the sacraments after a brief penitential process. Kasper's proposal, as it's come to be known, will no doubt figure prominently this October when the Synod on the Family meets for the last time in Rome. I sat down with the Cardinal here in Washington for a candid conversation about his proposal and its ramifications. It provides great insight into the mind of Cardinal Kasper, as you will hear. A year ago, the Cardinal was telling everyone that his proposal was, quote, clearly what the Pope wants, and that's evident, end quote. Tonight, he backs away from that papal endorsement, but he remains determined to press Synod fathers to embrace his proposal. In fact, he claims that a majority of them are on his side. Here's part one of my interview with Cardinal Walter Kasper. Your Eminence, for decades, you have been arguing that there needs to be mercy extended to divorced and remarried Catholics in the form of communion, granting them communion under certain cases. Do you feel you're close to achieving that end now with this Synod coming and where the Holy Father is?
This I do not know, because I left it open. I did not want to anticipate the Synod and the decision of the Holy Father, and therefore it's not a firm proposal, there are questions. And I get a lot of agreements, but also a lot of critiques, and there's a tension there. Now I propose to those who prepare the Synod to to prepare a text which can get the agreement of the great majority. It's the same method also we had in the council.
So your proposal was put forward, and it was controversial.
Of course it was.
But you have said, and I'm quoting you, the Pope approved of your proposal. You said clearly this is what he wants. Do you agree with that still? And are you speaking for the Pope?
No, of course I spoke beforehand with the Pope. It is not a conference, an academic realm. It's an important issue before the cardinals. And he was in favor to open the debate, but not a certain proposal. And I did not ask him what he wants, but he wanted to touch the problem and to open the debate. This he wanted. And this I did. But then I had the impression he was, more or less he agreed what he said afterwards to the cardinals. It was not against his opinion, but I cannot say that I have now made the proposal of the Pope.
No, because at the time of the Synod, I know there was some reportage where you were saying that you were speaking for the Pope and you understood his mind. Was that an exaggeration, or do you stand by it?
That's an exaggeration. I was expressing his mind in the sense that he wanted debate about all these problems. He's for openness and for frankness, and he says does not help to suppress the questions.
I want to explore this a little bit, just so the audience fully understands what is at stake here and what the proposal that we're talking about. It really is a proposal to allow divorced and remarried Catholics to return to the sacraments with some haste, correct?
Well, I am for discernment situation by situation. I had never said everybody who is divorced and remarried can go to the sacraments. Every situation is different. And we need confession fathers with experience who can speak with the people. It's a whole process. And then to come to a discernment of the situation, they help also to the people to have a discernment about the situation, and then perhaps he can give the absolution.
How do you preserve the indissolubility of marriage, that ideal, when you have what is essentially a fast track back to the sacraments for people in irregular unions of whatever sort?
Well, first of all, indissolubility of marriage for me is face of the Church. And because it's the word of Jesus Christ, you cannot create exceptions. But it's a question how to apply the word of Jesus to concrete situations. It's a question of, and I thought the Church has the authority to bind and to loose, and the Church can, in certain cases, make use of this authority.
So you're distinguishing between doctrine and pastoral practice. Are they two separate things?
No, they are not separate. This would be the doctrine. Practice must be founded in the doctrine, but you cannot deduce directly from a dogma to a concrete praxis.
Right, but in this case, though, when you say there's an indissoluble marriage and someone has divorced and then found somebody else, and then they come to church and say, I want the sacraments. Cardinal Sarah this week said, you have a first marriage that is ratified and consummated. Now you have a second union of some sort. And when these people come forth and we allow them to have communion, he says it's a heresy, a dangerous schizophrenic pathology. You would say what?
Well, it's a strong statement.
No, I'll say.
Very strong, but I cannot agree with this statement. Because, what makes impossible the access to sacraments is to live in grave sin. That's a canon law. But grave sin is not only a grave materia, but there must be the conscience and the intentionality, there must be the circumstances. The concept of grave sin is a very complex one, and therefore it needs a discernment case by case, whether there is the situation of grave sin or not.
But there seems to be this dual track, though, because we're saying you want to preserve the indissolubility of marriage,
Yes.
but the application of communion and how and to whom it is distributed might be another issue over here. But can you have both?
No, it's not another issue. And when this man or this woman is not in the personal situation of grave sin, and this happens,
They're not in a situation of grave sin?
it's objectively, but if they're subjectively, that's a problem. Grave sin implies the personal conscience, implies intentionality of the will, and therefore it needs a judgment of a priest who has experiences. And
But not a tribunal. You don't like the idea of the nullity process, the canonical process.
This is a different thing. Of course, this can help in certain cases, this nullity process, but the Church always distinguishes between the forum internum and the forum externum. And I think the discernment, whether a person, a concrete person, lives in grave sin or not, that's a question of the forum internum, not of the forum.
Yes, but don't you have an external problem of, okay, I decide to find a younger wife, and I leave my wife and 3 children, and I come to you and I say, but Father, I'm really in love with this person.
No,
doesn't my wife and aren't the wife and children, the first wife and children, entitled to justice?
But in this case, no. The spiritual father and director would say he can come to the sacraments. But I will tell you another example. When I was bishop, a priest came to me and said, well, I have such a case, a woman which was abandoned by her husband. But she now has remarried, he needed a husband for her children, and she prepared in a wonderful way the girl for First Communion. And now the priest said to me, I cannot say on the day of First Communion to the girl, you can, your mother cannot. And the mother did all to prepare the girl. That's a different question if somebody leaves his wife and his children and goes with a younger woman.
But that's not speaking to the marriage and whether the first marriage was licit and the second one wasn't. That's a pastoral question, and not speaking to the nullity of the first marriage, is it?
The first marriage can be valid, was in this case valid, there was no process of nullity, but nevertheless.
Tell me about this, in the canonical process as it exists now, the nullity process.
Yes.
There is a first trial and then there is a second hearing, if you will. You don't like the idea of that second hearing. You think it slows things up?
No, this is a canonical problem. I never interfered about this. This is a problem for the canonists.
But your proposal would shortchange this whole system, though. It would get around it, if you will.
Now, the nullity process can be, and it helps in certain cases, but there are also cases where nullity is not possible, and this is a different situation.
And at whose discretion would it be, in your mind, as to whether a couple should submit to that nullity process, or simply go to the parish priest and say, we'd like to come to communion?
No, I would say the parish priest should say, try first to go to the nullity process.
But you would say the parish priest is the person to consult.
Well, but this is the nullity process is forum externum. And then the parish priest can send them to the tribunal. And
while still giving them communion first?
No, in this case not. In this case not. But it needs a whole process of discernment which is necessary, and people like Cardinal Ratzinger or now Pope Benedict, they can receive the spiritual communion.
They can receive a spiritual communion.
Who receives the spiritual communion, he's one with Christ.
But they're denied the physical presence of Christ at the altar.
Yes, but he's united with Christ. And in he's united with Christ, he cannot live in grave sins. It would be a contradiction.
The question really is, and I've spoken to a number of people who've been subject to divorce, particularly women, feel this process would somehow not give them the justice or the hearing that they desire. Because, again, I'll use the example. The husband finds a younger woman, he marries her, leaving the wife and children. And the parish priest may say, well, this man loves this woman, they're in unity, they're praying, they're holy people, they give to the church. But should they be allowed to the sacraments
No,
without giving this woman her hearing?
No, I would exclude it.
But your proposal
No,
would
my
permit
proposals have criteria. And you have to look to certain criteria. And this kind, when he lives, his family, and he goes with a younger woman, I would say, no, it is a fellow, no. He should, no, he would not allow in this case, I think. But these are not the people who come.
If the first marriage is indissoluble, Your Eminence,
Yes.
doesn't the Church have an obligation to fully investigate, to make sure that that marriage was truly null, rather than just allowing it to the subjective judgment of a parish priest who may like this person and that one, but doesn't know the full background?
No. These categories I cannot accept, because if marriage is an icon, an image of the alliance of God with his people, and now to start Holy Scripture, how often the people of God abandoned them. And also Jesus was rejected by his people. Then he substituted himself, went to the cross, gave a new chance. And before he left on Easter Eve, he gave the church, his apostles, the authority to forgive and not to forgive, to bind and to loose,
sure.
and all this. This is also a sign of mercy. It's not only the category of human justice you can apply here, that the church must act according to the action of God and of God's mercy. And the church is sacrament of mercy. It means signs and instrument of the mercy of God. That's our Catholic understanding of the church. And if God gives acts in this way, the church can do it also.
This past spring you said, as we go into the Synod,
Yes.
your quote was, Francis must now make some changes that are visible. With the Synod, the great majority of people are expecting some changes in pastoral practices.
Yes.
Do you stand by that?
Yes, the majority of people, many people I know expect something, but it does not say that the Pope must follow.
And you would like to see your proposal adopted?
I put a question, as the Pope wanted, and I said I do not anticipate the decision of the Synod and of the Holy Father.
But you would like to see changes. You said that the Pope should make those pastoral
Yes, I would say it would be desirable, but it's his decision. I will accept his decision.
But Your Eminence, you have become the campaign manager for this idea.
I did not manage anything.
No, but I mean, you've been cast that way in the public mind.
Yes.
Does that upset you, annoy you?
No, I am a man of the church my whole life. I have never the intention to say to the church what they have. I listen to what the church has to say to me. And therefore I had 2 times spoken now with the Pope to what he thinks about this conference I have to give. I did not ask him for a solution, because it would not fair to ask the Pope directly. I must respect the freedom and the authority of the Pope, but I want to know whether he agrees that I speak about the problem. This I wanted. If the Pope had said to me, well, do not touch this, it's better, I would not say one word.
So he encouraged the conversation and for you to talk about it.
Conversation he encouraged, and he wanted the debate.
But he didn't bless the idea or say, I love this.
I did not detailed way say what I will say, and he did not want it. He gave me all freedom. But it was my responsibility, and I spoke then with several people in the Curia, which are in charge of this question, and I prayed about the thing. I was absolutely in peace, and this is very important. And I remained in peace with all of these attacks, and these sometimes very polemical attacks, without having no word with me.
What do you think of those books? All those books that came out with all the other cardinals?
But I would say, the cardinal can write what he wants, of course, but when he writes directly against me, I think It would be convenient. It would be fraternity to come first to speak, to have dialogue. This did not happen. And this was a deep wound for me. This behavior, I think that's not good. To do it this way, and then they publish the book. That's not a good spirit.
Do you see a transition here? It seemed early on, during the Synod, after the Synod, really up until about December or January, the Holy Father, in all of his interviews, he seemed to be very supportive of your proposal, making those same arguments and sounds. Now something has happened. He now seems to be turning away, questioning, and putting distance between your proposal and himself.
I do not know. I did not speak with him, and he did not speak with me. But
what are you hearing?
Well, Pope is a free man. It's free, and I'm totally free. I do not know what he wants. I do not know.
As you look at the situation now, as you see the African bishops, the Polish bishops, the United States bishops saying there shouldn't be a change in either practice or doctrine, you people writing, signing petitions, begging the Church Fathers not to make any changes, are you still confident that that might happen?
Well, it's one side, but there are many petitions also in the other sense, and I know many cardinals, I know many bishops who are more on my side.
You think there's more on your side now?
I do not know. I do not know. And my suggestion is to find now a formula where the great majority can adhere.
Are you working on that formula?
No. I'm no member in no dicastery, in no organization. It was my proposal to say, this is not the one part is defeated, one is victorious. This is not the way of a synod.
Do you foresee the Holy Father appointing you a synod father to the synod?
I do not know what the Holy Father thinks. I did not speak with him, and he did not tell me. And to be a member of the synod is not only a pleasure and so forth. If the Pope wants, I come, and if he does not want, he appoints another one.
Your Eminence, I know you brought this proposal forward and have submitted it to the body of bishops, and you have really been out advertising it and trying to expose people to your proposal all over the world. Do you feel any responsibility for the phenomena that people have written to me about, priests particularly, of divorced and remarried couples, gay couples, presenting themselves after Mass and saying, we want communion, you should allow us to have communion, this is clearly what the Pope wants. Do you feel any personal responsibility for that phenomenon?
Well, this is a misunderstanding. First of all, it was a question, and I put the question to open the debate. It's not a proposal. And therefore, of course, no couple can come, we want Holy Communion. I spoke about a penitential process, a penitential way. It needs time.
But there's already a penitential process. I mean, there's already the canonical process of nullity, yes?
Yeah, and the nullity process is one thing. I'm not against this process of nullity. This is one thing, and it will happen. And
so there's another process.
There's another process. But if people, when they have the statement of annulment, they can come to Holy Communion. That's clear.
But you do understand, when a churchman like yourself, a theologian, an esteemed international figure, a curial official, says, "Here is my proposal," and the Pope agrees with me.
Well, they did not say
that does cause some. Well, you did say. I mean, you did say, and the quote is, "Clearly, this is what he wants, and the Pope has approved of my proposal." Those were the quotes from the time.
He did not approve my proposal. The Pope wanted that I put the question, and afterwards, in a general way, before all the cardinals, he expressed his satisfaction with my talk. But he ended not in the special question. Also, I would not say he proved this proposal. No.
Well, that was Cardinal Walter Kasper. To react to the interview and what we all heard, I am joined from New York by canon lawyer and priest of that archdiocese, Father GERALD MURRAY. And with me on set here in D.C. is the editor of the CatholicThing.org, Robert Arroyo. Robert, thanks for being here. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. I want to jump right into this. First of all, give me your takeaway impression. As you watched that, did it change your opinion of Cardinal Kasper in any way, or his proposal? Robert Arroyo.
I'm very surprised. I mean, I give you great credit, Raymond. You honed in on the pressure points at every stage of that interview. And I think we have to give him a little bit of credit because, after all, back in February of 2014, the Pope invited him to address the bishops.
Correct.
Remember, that's how this whole process got started,
right,
of resurrecting this question of communion for the divorced and remarried. And afterwards, the Pope said, I heard this lecture that you gave, and I thought of it, and I read your book, and it reminded me of how wonderful it is when you do theology on your knees. You know? So there was a kind of a tacit endorsement. Now, it's clear that something has happened in the meantime.
Something has happened.
He seemed to be very confident. I was over at the Synod in October, as you know. He was giving a lot of interviews. He seemed to be very, very confident about where things were going, even dismissing the Africans. We remember that interview with Edward Pentine, our sometimes colleague here. There's a different tone here, and he seems to be parsing this out finer and finer and finer. So I don't know. It seems to me that something in Rome has changed, and he's trying to backpedal, is the right term?
No, there's a little backpedaling going on. Father Jerry Murray, would acceptance of the Kasper proposal necessitate, if you will, the throwing the nullity process, the annulment process aside, since you're subjectively leaving it in the hands of the parish priest to make the decision whether people could come to full communion or not?
It's a big problem to say that now couples who are in invalid marriages can simply go to the parish priest, and if they fit the criteria that Cardinal Kasper has established, that the parish priest can put them through some kind of process of penance, and then they can receive communion. This is creating a parallel, really unregulated, and I would say not at all doctrinally supported way of dealing with the question of adulterous second marriages. Yes, it would be a big problem. And quite frankly, I don't see where the Cardinal finds justification for it. I noted in the interview that he said we have to apply the words of Jesus to concrete situations.
Right.
But then a little bit later he said you can't deduce from a doctrine a practical, concrete discipline. But when the Lord said, if you divorce your wife and marry another, you commit adultery, very clear, and the way you apply it is say, if you're in an adulterous second marriage, you can't receive communion. That practice is directly deduced, and I think scripturally the only deduction you can make.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it does put the annulment process on ice, really.
Yeah, I think that this is, to put it in secular terms, I'm not going to try to compete with a canon lawyer here, but this is sort of like saying you either have to go on your computer and pay a $15 fine with your credit card, or go through a judicial process down at the town hall. I mean, no one is going to go through the process any longer. It's going to be simply a quick get-out-of-jail-free card.
Father Jerry, I want to get into this, and Robert, I want you to respond as well. The Cardinal made mention of grave sin, and he said it's complex. And he said, objectively, these couples who divorce and remarry, they're in grave sin, but not personally. Your reaction, canonically, does that wash?
This is a big problem because he's confusing subjective culpability for sin, am I responsible for my bad actions, and then the nature of the actions in and of themselves. And what the Church teaches about adulterous second unions is that they are objectively a grave offense, and they contradict the nature of married love and the nature of indissoluble marriage. So to say that, for instance, someone who gets divorced from a valid Catholic marriage and then civilly remarries, and then they're living in this adulterous second union, well, maybe they're subjectively innocent. That's a presumption. The common presumption is people who knowingly enter into adultery know what they're doing. It's not an accident. But it has no bearing on the objective violation of the law and the scandal that's given. Because you have to also remember, sin is not simply a personal matter. It affects the community. And it does give scandal. The incident that you spoke about with him, about a man who leaves his wife to marry a younger woman, this is precisely why the law of God has this consistency, and it's completely understandable. We should never encourage people to do bad behavior by condoning it in some cases, and then they'll apply it whenever they want.
No, it's a complicated proposal, because as you start picking at it and looking at it,
it almost dissolves in your hands. The Cardinal made mention of Benedict XVI, something I need to get some clarity on. And he says, Benedict XVI urged couples in irregular union to get spiritual or make a spiritual communion. Robert Royal, does that then necessitate that you're in full communion with the Church, or does it imply that?
Well, let me say, I'm trying to understand these various proposals that he puts forward. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I just see logical inconsistencies in this, because essentially what he's saying, against all logic, is that the spiritual communion essentially is Holy Communion. It is the same thing. You're already in full spiritual union with God. And I don't know of any theologian who would ever claim such a thing.
Is this dangerous territory, Father Jerry Murray?
Yes, it is, because a spiritual communion is the expression of the wish to be united to Christ. And those who are conscious that they're in a state of mortal sin of whatever sort, they can have that desire. They just have to go the next step, which is to be absolved of their sins in confession, and then not to return to that life of sin. And this is the problem with adultery. The Church says that if you are in an invalid second marriage and for the good of the children you can't split up, then you can live as brother and sister as long as you avoid adulterous activity. The Church is willing to grant absolution, and then you can receive communion. So there is a lot of confusion here, and it's not helpful because it's distracting from the Word of God. The Word of God is clear.
And there's a process that exists. I think a lot of people don't understand the nullity process, the so-called annulment process. You know, yes, it's rigid. Yes, there are criteria, and you must go through interviews, and it takes a long time, because you're talking about a permanent, indissoluble marriage that the Church officially comes down and says, this is null. It was null from the beginning. That is a major disruption. It's a major pronouncement. And I think to kind of just say, well, just visit the parish priest and, you know.
Well, he seems to distinguish. He doesn't want to touch the nullity process. But if it be, as I say,
it's an end run.
Yeah, it's an end run. Once this becomes an accepted practice, it's going to be hard to see how people are going to go through the. You know, there's a reason why even in secular law you have rules. You have rules of evidence. You know, you take you try to get down to the truth, and that's so that you can be fair to all the people who are involved. It's not simply we're going to forget about what happened and we'll go forward from here, because that doesn't really solve the problem that you have.
Right.
Now, these hard cases that he brings forward, I mean, they tug at all our heartstrings. Probably all of us have family members who may be in difficult circumstances, given the way that the world is these days with 50% divorce rate.
But those people who, in these hard cases, can go to the tribunals. What this seems to all cry out for, what I believe the Pope is moving towards, is to streamline that annulment process. And perhaps that's what this will all end up producing. Father Jerry Murray, your take.
Well, let's talk about that. Annulment is the declaration that there was no marriage.
Right.
And Cardinal Kasper is not pretending that everyone who gets a civil divorce was never really married in the Church. That goes against logic. We believe that people can act rationally and make the decision. And in law, we presume any marriage contracted in the Church is valid. What Cardinal Kasper is really asking for is people who believe their first marriage was valid should be granted the right to receive communion if they're in a second invalid union. That's one of two things then has to be established. One, that there really is no adultery, because basically, you know, he doesn't want to call people who are in invalid second marriages adulterers. He thinks that's too harsh. Or you can say adultery is no longer a mortal sin, so we can tolerate it as kind of an imperfect form of marriage. This is out of the universe of Catholic thinking. We have to be very clear. If we as rational creatures approach the Lord's sacraments and we do it knowingly, then we receive the sacrament, and the sacrament benefits us. In this world, you get a sacrament, doesn't work out, well, let's try another one. Let's do this and that. This is inconsistent, and really there are a lot of contradictions in this proposal. Cardinal Burke, Cardinal Sarah, they've said this quite clearly. The Catholic Church cannot separate itself from the clear Word of God.
Robert Roy, what do you make of the Cardinal Kasper's insistence that he was very wounded by the books that Cardinal Caffarra, Cardinal Burke, and others wrote critiquing his proposal, really taking it apart, both historically, theologically, canonically, and otherwise?
Well, he may be feeling it more now that he doesn't I get the impression that there isn't the Vatican backing that there initially was, or he thought there initially was for him there. But I don't know. There's a lot of cross-cutting. There was a lot of, on the part of not only Cardinal Kasper, but others sort of mocking of people who wanted to be more in tune and more in continuity with what has been the constant teaching of the Church, at the Catholic Church, at least going back 2,000 years. And it seemed to me that if the process of not speaking to others first did occur, it began with him and some of the people on that side who just sort of affirmed this stuff and mocked Africans, Poles, conservative Germans, all those who didn't seem to want to get on board with this. And the problem I foresee with all of this now is it's already confused. We're starting to already read stories about people saying that, well, we know what the Holy Father wants, and my local priest thinks he already knows what the Holy Father wants. So this confusion that he's introduced, and that you ask him in the interview, do you feel some responsibility for that? Well, he seems to think others have responsibility toward him, but he's created a situation that I think, even if the Synod holds the line in the fall, is going to be a very neuralgic time for the Catholic Church for years.
Father Jerry Murray, I'm going to give you the last word and then maybe a quick one from Robert. The disavowal of the papal endorsement for this plan, what does that tell you? And yet, Cardinal Kasper is resolute that he has a majority, or feels many cardinals and bishops support his proposal. What is that all about?
Well, look, there's campaigning going on here. Obviously, he's trying to stir up people to embrace his proposal. But again, I'm very bewildered because he said, well, in the end, when the Synod decision is made by the Pope, he'll abide by it. But in 1994, Pope John Paul II issued a document about this very question and said it's impossible. Now, he obviously didn't submit to that, so I would say to him, on what principle are we acting here? Is it the will that you have to see this proposal endorsed and you're going to keep pushing it, and when it wasn't endorsed 20 years ago, you kept pushing it? You know, he says he wants a frank debate, and then he says when people publish books, they should have come to him privately. I think there's a lot of confusion in his approach, and I have to say, answer the critics. Cardinal Kasper said, what about the first marriage? And I really haven't heard an answer to that from Cardinal Kasper. He needs to tell us, is that first marriage still in existence? Because if it is, his proposal is shot down.
We will leave it there. We're out of time. Robert Royal, Father Jerry Murray, we will catch up with you all in the days ahead. You can read both Robert and Father Jerry's columns and commentary at thecatholicthing.org. Remember, we will share part 2 of my interview with Cardinal Kasper and his reaction to some of his Vatican colleagues, the German cardinals, and more on our next show. You will not want to miss that. When we return, they're striving to bring beauty and peace to a world starved for both, and topping the classical charts in the process. Father CASSIAN FOLSOM of the Monks of Norcia talk about their new CD, Benedicta, and how his personal struggles have deepened his mission. When the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
I love music, and music for the monastic life is an essential part of our prayer. So chant is part of the air we breathe. And since we do it so often, it comes naturally after a few decades.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. After a nearly 200-year absence, chant has returned to a small but historic monastery in the Umbrian hills of Italy. A group of Benedictine monks founded a community in the town of Norcia, the birthplace of Saint Benedict. They did so in 1998. Once again, sung prayers filled the Basilica of Saint Benedict. Now the monks, along with de Montfort music, are allowing the world to enter their monastery. They've released a new CD called Benedicta, Marian Chant from Norcia. I sat down earlier this week with the prior and founder of the Monks of Norcia, Father CASSIAN FOLSOM, to talk about the new CD, the importance of chant, and what it has meant to him personally.
Father, tell me about the founding of this Benedictine community in 1998.
Well, I asked permission of my abbot in 1995. He was newly elected, and I thought for sure he would say no. And much to my surprise, he said yes. But it took 3 years for it actually to happen, and all sorts of obstacles, and so obviously it was the will of God, otherwise it wouldn't have happened.
Where were you before that? You were in a community, and you had a music background.
I do, of sorts. That is, my first year of college, I studied voice at Indiana University, at the music school there. But I transferred to the seminary in my second year, so it wasn't a very long training.
Well, it's a prestigious school, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And what of that did you take with you into your monastic life?
Well, the music background certainly, because in the seminary I was always a cantor. In the monastery I've been choir master at my home monastery of St. Meinrad. Also in founding the new community, I was the choir master for many years until a young monk would come along to take over I was always a cantor.
And how did you end up at Norcia, of all places?
Well, yes, it's the birthplace of St. Benedict, so it's important. And there hadn't been a monastery there for almost 200 years. That was divine providence too. We started in Rome, and the intention was to remain in Rome, this new monastery. But in the year 2000, the abbot primate had a heart attack and resigned, and he was the one who helped found us. And so we were open for new possibilities, and the Archbishop of Spoleto-Norcia requested that we transfer to Norcia. And of course there are many ups and downs in that process too. Sure. But we finally made it there at the end of the Jubilee year. Wow.
And that the Basilica of St. Benedict there, chant has been heard in those walls for really
hundreds and hundreds
of 1,000 years.
At least.
Conservatively.
Yes.
What is it like to have been the founding member that really restored and brought this worship of God back to the monastery there?
Well, for many years, because the community was very small, we arrived in Norcia with 3 people, now we're 18. But we prayed in the crypt of the church, which is actually the birthplace of St. Benedict. And you could, perhaps it's silly to say so, but you could feel that those walls had been impregnated with prayer for centuries and centuries. But now, because we're too big, we've moved upstairs to the main church.
Is that where you all recorded Benedicta?
Yes, and the acoustics are splendid. So if it sounds good, it's hopefully because the monks sing well, but also because the acoustics.
Look, I was telling you before we started, I have a lot of chant in my collection at home. Many of them sound overproduced, almost like performances. This is something other. Why do you think it has a distinctive sound and a quality that people can't quite put their finger on, but they're drawn to it, no matter who they are, Catholic or otherwise?
Well, maybe for a couple of reasons. The monks believe what they're singing, so that's communicated. And they're young. And you can hear that in the voices too. My voice by now is old and tired, but we have young people who have beautiful color in their voices, and a couple of the monks have lots of musical background even before they came to the monastery. Really? So that helps too.
Yeah, and you can hear that. Now you all are known, if you're known for anything, so far, for your beer.
I'm glad we're known for that.
And you've got this microbrewery that has become legendary. I know people here in the United States who make trips over to buy it. What is it about that beer? Who started this, and is that part of your ministry, your mission?
The beer is in the Trappist Belgian tradition. So we learned from the Trappist monks in Belgium. And they have century-old tradition of beer making. We were looking for a work that the community could do that would be income producing. So the original idea was we need to make a living.
Right.
But it has proved to be much more than that, because beer, good beer especially, is a bridge between the monks and the rest of the world. So even if people have no faith, if they like beer, then there's something that brings them to the monastery, and then we can start a conversation, and pretty soon they're talking about more serious things. And that has happened over and over and over again.
So they come for the beer, but they stay for the Mass and the chant and the rest of it.
Absolutely. It's a tool of evangelization.
What's the connection between the beer and the approach and appeal of that and this new CD in your mind? Is there a connection?
Well, they're both initiatives that the monks have made that are somewhat out of the ordinary. It shows a certain, that we're willing to take risks and we're willing to do new things, and there's lots of energy and activity, and this is, they're both expressions of that.
Who chose this particular selection of music? These are Marian songs. These are antiphons and prayers. And this is something you do 8 times a day, we should say. This is not something you just did because the producers came into town.
Right.
In fact, I heard from one of your producers, you all would record and then you just keep going because it was that
time for prayer. Yeah. Actually, the selections were made by 2 of the monks who have musical background. That is the present choir master, Father Basil, and the previous choir master, Brother Ignatius. And they did research on the history of these particular chant pieces, and Father Basil chose them with a view to highlighting different moments in the life of Mary. So it's organized in a kind of chronological way, starting from the Immaculate Conception to the crowning of Mary as Queen of Heaven.
It did not escape my ear or eye that you all say the extraordinary form of the Mass, the old rite. You hear this beautiful Latin sung on the CD. Is there a message here as well about sacrality and the connection to these long-held traditions and the importance of maintaining them?
Yes. The old rite, or the liturgical tradition of the Church, for us is a patrimony, not a museum piece, but something that's alive. And it draws young people. And because of the sacrality, that is, it's about God, it's not about us, you see. And that's powerful, and that draws people.
And they're drawn to what, do you think? You know, many people will say, and you read this all the time, oh, you've got that Baroque language and all those old vestments and the bells, and it goes on and on. That's a repellent to the young people. They do not want to see that.
Come and see. Check it out. It's not repellent to young people.
Well, your monastery is overflowing with young guys. What's the average age, 33?
33, in fact. Yeah. I'm the old guy.
I have listened very closely over the last few days to the whole CD repeatedly. You are featured on a number at the beginning of some of these chants in solos.
I was part of the hoi polloi, that is the whole community in singing, but it's a great thing for me to pass on that role of solo singing to the younger monks.
Was this something important for you to do, to have it memorialized, to have it there?
We don't think about memorializing ourselves, really. It's just an expression of what we do that we wanted to share with our friends.
But it's heartfelt. I mean, there's something different here. And I think you hit upon it. This is the prayer that you all naturally do. This isn't a faked performance or something choreographed. And you all understand what you're singing, and that really comes through to the listener, I think.
That's great. That's really great.
Particularly your solo at the beginning. I think it's the 2nd or 3rd track. It's early on in the recording. You don't know where it is. I do. And there is something urgent there. I know you've been struggling recently with cancer. Has that changed the way you pray?
Well, that's a good question. I've had cancer twice. And thanks be to God, it's in remission. Say the dragon is sleeping, but it's a chronic disease. It can come back anytime. It changes the way I look at the world, certainly. I think more of the last things than I thought before. And much of our liturgical music is about the last things, you know. So it gives you a perspective of divine realities that perhaps you need suffering in order to understand those things.
What would you say to those who are struggling? Some find such solace in this music, have found such peace in it. Is it a restorative for you as well?
Oh, absolutely. But I would put it in a more general sense, not just this CD, but in the Old Testament, you remember that Saul had these fits of madness from time to time.
Right.
And when he did so, David would play the harp for him and he would calm down. Well, if I go into Vespers, for example, kind of agitated and preoccupied about lots of things, by the time Vespers is over, with the waves of psalmody, then I've finally calmed down. And so it brings peace. Certainly, I experience that practically every day.
You've said that this is like breathing, and that there's so much pollution in the world, and that this is almost a curative. I've often thought, when I've heard communities in prayer, there is a vibration, a physical vibration that it gives off. I think evil has a vibration as well.
It's true.
Do you see this as a needed presence in the world, physically as well as otherwise?
We are desperately needy of these things. And I think monasteries can provide little oases of good sense and faith and beauty in a world that's gone mad.
What do you hope will be the reaction in the listener, no matter who picks this up?
Well, I think they would perceive the beauty of it. And beauty is a wonderful way of bringing people to God. That's one thing. The beauty and the peace of it. It's something peaceful. It can settle their agitated souls. So if beauty and peace can be the results, that's really wonderful.
Benedicta, Marian Chant from Norcia by the Benedictine Monks of Norcia, is available now at music outlets everywhere. They are #1 on iTunes classical chart. Go to demontfortmusic.com for more information, and if you click on the link to the Monks of Norcia website, you can purchase a copy there and help support the monks in their work. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. So what did you think of the interview with Cardinal Kasper? Use #WorldOver and tell me. I'm on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, and don't miss next week, part 2 of my exclusive interview with Cardinal Walter Kasper, and I'll be talking to Kentucky Senator and presidential candidate Rand Paul. Until next time, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.